There's a guy who likes games, and the best that he's played are the ones that you'll see on the top 100. Repeat that part. Top 100 games. I get a little bit freaky. That's right, I'm a little bit freaky. Hello, and welcome to The Discriminating Gamer, the board gamer's answer to Animal Planet. My name is Cody, and welcome to our very first of my top 100 games of all time episodes. Today we're going to cover my number 100 through my number 91. Now, before I begin with the list, I would like to take a moment and just tell you what my methodology was. I took a leaf out of the great Tom Vasel's book, and what I did was I wrote nearly 200 names of games I like and put them into a shoebox. I mixed them up. I pulled one name out, I put it down. I pulled a second out and I said, do I like this game more or worse than the first game? And through this methodology, which I thought would take me about an hour, ended up taking me several, I compiled a list of my top 100 games of all time as of August 2014. There's still a lot of great games coming out this year, so it probably will change it, but you know, if I decide to do one of these lists next year, then I'll have to alter it then. But as of August 2014, these are my top 100 games of all time. So let's get started with the list. And first up, at number 100, my 100th favorite game is Battle Beyond Space from Z-Man Games. Battle Beyond Space is a great light space wargame. It's the definition of a light space wargame. I like it because what you do is you play cards to move ships around this board with various little spaces in it. And wherever a ship lands, it automatically fires so many hexes in front of it. And when that happens, any ships that are in front of it take damage. If they're little fighters, I believe they're immediately destroyed. The larger capital ships can take 2 or 3 hits. And then, but it's not just that. That would be very simple. There's also different race cards, species cards that you can play that give you certain advantages and bonuses. There's asteroids you have to navigate around. It's a very fun, light game. I really enjoy it. That's my number 100, Battle Beyond Space from Z-Man Games. Discriminating Gamer's Top 100 Games. Number 99. Now, I did a review, a full review, in episode 3, season 1 of The Discriminating Gamer, and this was a game that I mentioned I wasn't completely in love with because it was a solitaire game. And I should clarify that even though it is a solitaire game, and I would much prefer games against other people, I can still appreciate and enjoy and have fun with solitaire games. So I'm not poo-pooing solitaire games in general. So, my number 99 is Cruel Necessity from Victory Point Games. Cruel Necessity is one of Victory Point Games' States of Siege game. And what that means is they have a various line of games in which there are various tracks, armies moving toward a central position, and if they get to the central position, you lose the game. So you've got to hold that central position. In this case, it's the English Civil Wars, and you're holding London. And you've got enemy armies advancing, you know, from Cornwall, from Scotland, from Ireland, the Midlands. You've got to hold and push these armies back, but at the same time, you have various cards that you can try to purchase to help your chances, to give you victory points, or to trigger fun events. You have political tracks that you constantly have to manipulate in order to keep from losing the game. It's a very, very fun game. It's a very fun mechanic. That is Cruel Necessity from Victory Point Games, my number 99. The Discriminating Gamer's Top 100 Games. Number 98 is a fairly new game as well. It is a game by the great, prolific board game designer Martin Wallace. This game is not without its flaws. Some would call it a flawed masterpiece. I don't know that I'd go that far, but it's a good game, if it is a bit flawed, and that is A Study in Emerald. Now, A Study in Emerald essentially it's a deck builder board game. You're deck building cards to accomplish various tasks, but you have a secret allegiance. Either you are a loyalist or a restorationist toward the cause in Great Britain. But here's the catch. It's late 19th century, and it is Sherlock Holmes' adventure in a Cthulhu-dominated UK. Essentially, a Cthulhu-type monster is ruling Great Britain, and there are various other Cthulhu-type monsters, H.P. Lovecraft monsters, ruling the various kingdoms of Europe. And so your allegiance is you're either supporting them, you're a royalist, or you're a restorationist. You're trying to restore human rule over the planet. So you're trying to get rid of these Cthulhu monsters. Now, it is very, very interesting thematically, but I also like the deck building aspects. I like the fact that there's a really weird, different and exciting rule where you have an allegiance, and you don't know who else has your same allegiance initially. You will pick that up when you see what their actions are. But over the course of the game, if you win and somebody else on your team loses, you lose. But you want to get more points than they do, so it's an interesting balancing act. You want to get more points than the people behind you, but you want to make sure that they have more points, even though the furthest behind on your team has more points than the people on the other team. So it's a very, very interesting mechanic. And just a note here, if you enjoy kind of fun fiction stories, fantasy stories, or even Sherlock Holmes stories, I highly, highly recommend that you read Neil Gaiman's short story, A Study in Emerald. It's the basis for this game. It's a wonderful, wonderful, wonderful short story, and I think you can probably find it for free online somewhere. But it's great. Read the book, play the game. A Study in Emerald by Martin Wallace, published by Tree Frog Games, his company, and that is my number 98. Number 97 is a game that kind of, some say perhaps revolutionized the way we look at card games. This is another one that came out here just a year or so ago, and that is Love Letter from AEG. Love Letter is a very, very simple game. It's a card game with only 16 cards, and you, of course, have to take one card that is your hand, and then you draw a second card that you either have to discard the first card you had or the second card, and then that effect comes into play. And it can cause all sorts of weird things. It's for 2 to 4 players. It's a very interesting game, and it's surprisingly... there's a surprising strategy and depth for the fact that there's just 16 cards. It really is. It's really interesting. I actually just recently played Lost Legacy, the Starship, which is kind of similar to Love Letter, but I think Love Letter still is the better game. So that's Love Letter, AEG. That is my number 97. Number 96. Now, you'll probably see a lot of these. I love big, thematic, deep, relatively complex games, particularly those with a historical background, particularly war games. So, for my number 6, or pardon me, my number 96, I actually chose a game. I haven't played it in a while. This is Napoleon in Europe. It was published by Eagle Games. Now, Napoleon in Europe is one of these big, complex games. There's various scenarios, and you can reenact the various theaters and various aspects of the Napoleonic War. The map board is just beautiful. It's got great minis. But in addition to this big strategic game, you're playing on this map of Europe, you also play these smaller tactical games on a tactical board. So it's almost kind of 2 games in one. You've got the big strategic game and the smaller tactical game. And they are both just amazing. And of course, whether you win or lose the tactical battles determines how the strategic game plays out. Now, I really like this game quite a bit. I bought this game probably around 2001, 2002. It was a long time ago. And I played it several times, really enjoyed it, but I probably haven't played this game in over 10 years, and I need to play it again sometime. But the reason I haven't is because it's a long game. Now, it kind of depends on the scenario you're playing. but it's a game that can take a while. And it's hard to find people to play those long games. And I have some good friends that'll probably go for it if I asked them. But there's just been other games I wanted to play lately. But I need to play this one again. It is a great game. That is my number 5, my number 96. That is Napoleon in Europe by Eagle Games.
No discriminating gamers, top 100 games.
My number 95 is a game that, again, came out a few years ago, about 4 or 5 years ago, I believe, based on a Game of Thrones, and that, of course, is the tactical battle game from a Game of Thrones. That is Battles of Westeros from Fantasy Flight Games. Now, Battles of Westeros from Fantasy Flight Games, it really encompasses that the theme and the characters from the Game of Thrones books, of which I am a huge fan. The HBO series I like, but the books are just amazing. And Battles of Westeros is based on Richard Berg's command and color system, essentially, where you've got the 3 sides of the board, and you can move, you play cards, or in this case roll dice to move on the right, the center, or the left. In this game, though, like I say, primarily you're rolling dice, which allows you to activate certain units on the board. These kinds of games can be frustrating, because if you don't get the die roller and some of the other games get the card you want, you can be in a perfect position to do something, but it can be very, very frustrating. But I enjoy the theme, I like it. It's not my favorite one of these commands and color kind of games, so hint, hint on future episodes here. But I like it. It's fun. I love the theme. It's generally an engaging game. So that is my number 95, Battles of Westeros from Fantasy Flight Games.
There was a discriminating gamer, and he had 100 favorite games.
My number 94. My number 94 comes from Lock and Load Publishing. They make a lot of war games, but they also make some other interesting thematic games. And so my choice for 94 is a game they publish called All Things Zombie. Now I know I actually no longer have my copy of All Things Zombie. I actually gave it to Shawn. And I have to tell you, so many people are saying, oh, I'm so sick of zombies. I'm sick of zombies these days, yada yada. Well, Shawn is not sick of zombies. Shawn loves, loves, loves zombies. And I gotta tell you, I do too. I love watching zombie movies. I love reading a zombie book. I really enjoy it. So I'm not sick of the genre at all. Is it being flooded with games? Yeah. Are a lot of the games not so great? Yeah. All Things Zombie came out a few years ago, and it was a great, great game. It was set in outside of Las Vegas, so a lot of the boards, it came with various boards, they were kind of set in kind of desert towns, little kind of, out of the way desert towns, and you had little chits that represented your character that would then have to go into buildings and search and find goods. It's a pretty typical idea for zombie games. We've seen it done since, and frankly done better. But what I liked about All Things Zombie was when you would go into a building, you could suddenly be ambushed by zombies, and there was this really, really cool impulse system that dictated, how you dealt with the zombies, how and when you were able to fire or melee combat, and that was really interesting, and I haven't seen that done really since. It's a mechanic that I think could use a little more exploration, and I enjoyed it. It was a fun game. It was highly thematic. It was a little tense because you'd go into those buildings and you wouldn't know what you'd find. But I really enjoyed it. All Things Zombie from Lock and Load Publishing, and that is my 94. My number 93. My number 93 is a game, again, I haven't played this game in a while. It's an older game. I don't think it's in print any longer, and that is Machiavelli from Avalon Hill Games. Now, Machiavelli was a very, very fun and interesting game. It was based on diplomacy, that kind of diplomacy mechanic where you'd have about, I think, 7 or 8 players would have to negotiate to help each other or not help each other. You had simultaneous movement, so you never knew exactly who was going to do what, if they're going to help you out, if they're going to stab your back. But it takes place in Renaissance Italy. And it was cool because one of the characters could be the Pope, and he could excommunicate other players, or he could declare a crusade against the Turkish player. This game differed from Diplomacy, though, also in the fact that in addition to armies and navy units, you also had garrisons. You could garrison your towns and turn armies into navies after turning them into a garrison. But also, there were kind of some random events, like a plague. You would have to see if a plague hit, and a plague could destroy armies. So it added a little bit more of a random element to the game, and I like that a lot. I love the pure strategy of Diplomacy and the pure personality of Diplomacy, but I like that randomness and a few of the more thematic details that Machiavelli brought to the game. So really, really enjoyed Machiavelli. My number 93. Number 92 is a fairly new game that I enjoyed, and that is Cinque Terre, the 5 Villages from Rio Grande Games. Cinque Terre is a pick-up and deliver game, essentially, where you are selling fruit. You're selling fruit in the 5 villages in Italy, and essentially you have to move your little cart up through the villages and then go through the places to pick up the various cubes, which represented the fruit, that then you would sell in the villages. But what was cool about this game is you would, at the beginning of the game, you would roll dice, different colored dice, and then set those different colored dice next to the villages, and they essentially act as the price in those villages. That is what the fruit is worth in those villages. And the problem is, you can only go in one direction. So you can't go up and then go back. You would have to go forward. So sometimes you're asking yourself, well, is it better to sell my fruit here even though I'm going to get a lower price for it, but then I can go through and pick up more fruit and come around again. So you had some of these difficult choices to make in that regard. But also, too, you're competing to pick up contracts. I can't remember what they're called in the game, but you're trying to get the contracts. You're trying to get sell the most in certain cities. There's a lot of strategy. It's a fun game. The theme itself, I was kind of, take it or leave it. But it was a fun game. I liked it, and I think certainly younger players, too, would really get a kick out of it. That is Cinque Terre, the 5 Villages from Rio Grande Games. Finally, my number 91. My number 91 is, well, it's part of a series of games that is very near and dear to my heart, that I just love a lot, and that is the Tempest series of games from AEG. You can see them right here, the Tempest series. And this game is probably my least favorite of the Tempest series, spoiler alert, but I really enjoy it quite a bit, and that is number 4, Canalis. Now, in Canalis, you and your opponents are essentially trying to build, you're trying to connect various parts of the city to the harbor. But you're not just trying to connect factories to the harbor so they can ship goods. You have to connect them to tenements for workers so they can work in the factory. You have to connect the factories to the raw materials that you want to sell. And you're all trying to do this. And you each get certain cards, you draft cards, you pass them around, so you have to pick which card you want and then pass the others to the guy next to you. And so it makes, again, for some very interesting choices. How are you going to construct your city? And frequently, you will have your opponents cut you off with their canals, with their buildings. So a very, very sound strategy at the beginning can backfire if your opponents build around you. So there's almost kind of a Tetris feel to this game. A very fun game, part of the Tempest series. That is Canalis. That is my number 91 from AEG, Canalis. The discriminating gamer's top 100 games. And that is the first of my top 10 games for my top 100 games of all time, 2014. I hope you enjoyed this list. I hope you will stick around and watch the rest as I post them in the coming weeks. If you agree with any of my choices or don't agree with my choices, please leave a comment here at YouTube or on our website or on Facebook. We would love to hear from you. And please, 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 please like us on Facebook, subscribe to us on YouTube. We're the Discriminating Gamer. The Discriminating Gamer. Yeah.
Please somebody help me on my feet again, and I don't know where I'm
Start repeating again. Start repeating again. And these games.
Oh, I was looking at something.
That's fine. Just repeat. And these games.
That you play.
Are the best. So he says. To be viewed. On YouTube. Are the top. Repeat that part.
Sorry.
Top 100 games. There's a guy who likes games, and the best that he's played are the ones that just say to be viewed on YouTube, and the games that he plays are the best that he says are the top 100 games.
I thought it was around.
It's supposed to be.